A perpetual roar resonated through the steel hull of the skyship, as if the heavens themselves growled at all who dared to defy them. That roar had become the constant lullaby and morning alarm for those born into the endless maelstrom. It was perilous, inescapable, and as constant as the beating of a human heart. In its swirl of gray and black thunderheads, it made the planet seem as though it had been devoured by its own sky. Although the surface below remained an unknown realm ravaged by lightning storms and tornadoes, entire communities had taken to the air in search of fleeting patches of calm, scouring the clouds for small mercies and momentary respite. From the deck of the battered vessel known as the Helios Grace, nothing existed but the swirling clouds and the flash of lightning that illuminated the gloom. The young pilot, Mira, tightened her grip on the helm. She was 17 seasons old, though few bothered counting years anymore. Yet her nerve was that of a veteran. Like everyone in her crew, she was born to a world where calm was never guaranteed. Her father had once told her that the old days were different, that the sky had once been blue. Some scientists had tried to explain how an airborne microbe or possibly runaway climate collapse had agitated weather patterns to this never-ending fury, but no one truly agreed. In the end, the reason mattered less than the daily struggle to stay alive. Winds hammered the Helios Grace, but Mira and her co-pilot Rowan inched the vessel forward. They had been chasing a rumored calm zone for nearly 4 days. There had been glimpses, a faint silver slice in the cloud cover, a sudden dip in wind currents, even a fleeting moment of sunshine. If they could find the center of that calm, it might last a day or an hour, or maybe a mere handful of minutes. But to open the hatches, to breathe air free of torrential wind, to repair battered hulls under a patch of clear sky, those were the kind of small miracles that kept the Stormriders going. "You see that glimmer?" Rowan asked, pointing off the starboard side. Mira leaned forward, wiping condensation from the glass window to peer into the swirling murk. A streak of turquoise tinted the edge of a cloud formation with the practiced precision that came from a lifetime in the air. Mira flicked a switch on the console to activate the ship's thrusters, hoping to fling the Helios Grace forward to chase the glimmer. Lightning illuminated the sky, revealing strange shapes in the clouds. Could be an enormous funnel cloud, or possibly the shredded remains of some older skyship. No one truly knew how many vessels existed in the storms, though it was said that entire fleets roamed the skies. Each ship survived in its own manner, forging alliances or staying hidden. Collisions were frequent, and reminders that any day could be a vessel's last. The Helios Grace approached the turquoise hue, and the turbulence lessened. Mira held her breath. Was this it? A fragile hush blanketed the ship. A moment later, a faint ray of sunlight pierced through the gloom, illuminating the deck in an almost unearthly glow. Mira felt her pulse race. She spun the wheel gently, guiding the ship's nose upward. She sensed the momentum shifting, the ever-present buffeting winds finally relenting. Row by row, the black clouds parted, granting a small patch of sky so clear it felt like an opening to another realm. The hush deepened. Thunder and shrieking winds subsided into a distant murmur. Mira exhaled, and for the first time in days she didn't have to shout to be heard. Rowan gave a breathless laugh. A crease of a smile tugged at Mira's lips. It wasn't a large opening, perhaps only 500 yards wide, but it was enough. Mira activated the ship's navigational bracing, locking the vessel's position within the eye of stillness. Crew members poured onto the deck, exhausted but laughing. A hush settled over them all. They gazed upward at the break in the seemingly eternal storm. Sunlight, shimmering pale gold and almost forgotten, touched their faces. For a second, they let themselves believe in hope. An urgent call from the lower decks broke the spell. One of the mechanics, Taro, rushed up, panting. "We've got a breach in the mid-hull from the last lightning strike," he shouted, pointing at a rusted section covered by a makeshift metal patch. "We need a quiet spot to weld it shut, or it's only a matter of time before the next wind shear tears us open." Rowan nodded. "We've got maybe half an hour here, if that. Let's get it done." The rest of the crew sprang into action, racing to fix everything they could. The Helios Grace was an aging vessel, its once gleaming metal sides corroded by acid rain and near-constant rocking. Every calm zone was a chance to remedy what the storms had battered. Mira joined in, grabbing a welding torch. and protective goggles. The air was still cold, but at least the burners could operate without being snuffed out by gale-force winds. Sparks danced in the rare stillness, and the metallic clang of repairs echoed across the deck. Despite the urgency, there was a sense of normalcy in their frantic work. This was how the Stormriders lived. Find calm, fix the ship, gather as many supplies or water from condensation as possible, then push forward when the storm reclaimed its territory. After what felt like seconds but was probably close to half an hour, Rowan's voice rang out. "Mira, we've got a bogey coming in." Lightning flickered, and the edges of the comm zone had begun folding in on themselves. The swirling walls of clouds pressed closer, and across the gloom came a shape. Another skyship. This one was sleek, built from dark metals that flared with bursts of electric blue energy. Through her scope, Mira caught a glimpse of a hull stenciled with a jagged insignia, the Raptor's Claw, a known raider vessel. They thrived on boarding other ships, stealing resources, sometimes leaving the unsuspecting to drift into the storm's maw. "Battle stations!" Mira yelled, dropping her welding torch. She dashed to the helm, the rest of her crew abandoning their tasks and racing to defensive positions. They had at most minutes before the calm zone was entirely swallowed by the storm. The Raptor's Claw was known for ambushing vessels exactly when repairs were underway, seizing cargo and sometimes kidnapping skilled mechanics or navigators. An ominous hum signaled the approach of a harpoon tether. From the vantage point of the helm, Mira could see a metal spike glint in the half-light. A second later, a crash rang across the hull. The boarding line embedded itself just below the main deck. "Rowan, cut that line," she shouted, urging the engines to roar as the Helia's Grace trembled. The calm zone was shrinking, the walls of swirling black beginning to swirl overhead. Lightning flashed dramatically, reflecting off the harpoon's steel. Rowan sprang forward with the saw, working furiously at the tether. But the Raptor's Claw fired a second harpoon, sinking it deeper this time. A wave of masked raiders slid down the line, rifles strapped to their backs. Mira jammed the throttle forward, hoping to break free, but the Raptor's Claw was nearly equal in size to their own ship, and the engines protested loudly under the strain. Each side's thrusters glowed, trying to yank the other one around in the clear pocket that was now echoing with thunder shaking the hull. Chaos erupted on deck. Mira caught glimpses of her crewmates locked in hand-to-hand combat with the raiders. Swords clashed against scythes of sharpened steel. The air shimmered with muzzle flashes as a few people fired flintlock shots, ancient relics from the days when bullet cartridges were still manufactured. The acrid odor of gun smoke mixed with metallic tang from electricity. Somewhere behind her, Rowan roared, driving a raider back with a well-placed punch. Another crew member, Taro, swung a length of chain, keeping two intruders at a distance. Lightning struck nearby and set the entire vessel rattling as the comm patch twisted inward. The heaviness of the storm overcame them. A battered raider lunged for Mira, brandishing a small arc blade lit with crackling current. She barely leapt aside in time, feeling the heat of the electricity graze past her arm. As the raider reared back to strike again, Rowan tackled him. The blade clattered noisily. The skyship jerked violently. A metal shriek rose from the hull. Mira realized with horror that the starboard side of the Helia's Grace had begun to buckle where the second harpoon was lodged. One unlucky blow of lightning had electrified the tether line, warping steel plates. Her mind raced. If they lost the starboard hull in this storm, there was no saving them. She scanned the console. The engine power was fluctuating wildly. The pressure gauge soared into the danger zone. They had only one option left: drop into a lower cloud bank that might be less tumultuous, hoping the Raptor's Claw would be forced to break away or risk crashing. But it was a gamble, because everything beneath them was a violent underlayer, rumored to be even deadlier than the swirling top. Still, it might be their only chance to survive this ambush. She shouted, "All hands brace! Dropping altitude!" In one swift motion, she unlocked the pressure valve to the helium chamber, letting the airship sink. The deck tilted, sending raider and crew member alike stumbling. The Helia's Grace sank into the swirling gloom, the ring of clouds above them closing like a trap. Thunder boomed overhead, and a rush of hail clattered against the hull. For several heartbeats, it was impossible to see anything but swirling blackness. The shriek of metal announced that the second harpoon tether was under extreme strain. Mira prayed it would snap. Moments later, a deafening crack tore through the air. The tether parted, whipped around, and flung several hapless raiders into the storm as the raptor's claw reeled backward. Freed from the anchor, the Helia's Grace plunged through layers of frantic wind shear, lightning strobing from every direction. Mira struggled with the helm, refusing to let the vessel spin out of control. The deck pitched as freezing rain battered them. Crew members scrambled for handholds. Somewhere near the broken starboard hull, Rowan fought to seal the breach, while Taro tried to keep the engines from overheating. For what felt like an eternity, the Helia's Grace hurtled downward, lost in the swirling darkness. Then, with a final push of the throttle, Mira found a calmer air current. The ship settled into a tenuous drift, out of immediate freefall. The storm raged around them, but they'd found a pocket less violent than the descent they had emerged from. The crew took a collective breath, though none of them could relax. The entire ship groaned with the tension of a near disaster. Mira peered through the frost-laden windows, searching for any sign of the raptor's claw. They seemed to have given up pursuit, at least for the moment. Possibly they had no desire to risk dropping so low, or had been too damaged to follow. Either way, the danger had passed, replaced by the relentless reality of the howling storm. Many of the calm pockets had vanished entirely now that they were deeper within the planet's cloud layers. Above them, the storm's overhead flickers offered the only light. There was no open sky here. Only the swirling, unending darkness shot through with electric fury. As the Helia's Grace limped along, Rowan approached Mira. A cut dripped blood along his brow, though he pressed a bandage against it. "We've got to find another calm zone soon, or we'll start losing essential systems," he said. "Two of our thrusters are slagged, the starboard side is compromised, and we're running low on salvage parts. We can't keep this up forever." Mira nodded. "We push forward while we still can," she said quietly. "There are rumors of a stable calm near the Firetooth Mountains. If we can navigate that far, maybe we'll stand a chance at repairing the hull properly." No one knew for certain if the Firetooth Mountains even existed above land, or if they were some mythic outcroppings. Tales spoke of their red-hot peaks bursting through the clouds, a place of permanent updrafts that could form a stable eye in the storm. But Stormriders thrived on rumor, for rumor was sometimes all they clung to. With determination, Mira set her course, bracing for the next wave of turbulence. She felt the exhaustion in her bones, but the idea of a calm zone, one that lasted for days or weeks, spurred her on. Time lost its usual meaning in the churn of thunderclouds. Light and dark were measured more by the intensity of lightning than by the sun's presence. Crew members napped in short shifts, strapped into harnesses to avoid being flung about when the ship lurched. Mira remained at the helm, scanning every reading she could glean from the battered instruments. Occasionally she climbed out onto a platform to watch for glimpses of other ships or breaks in the swirling sky. After 2 days' travel, Taro burst into the bridge with excitement. "I see a reflection in the distance," he said, breathless. "It could be rock, or maybe just a wide lightning arc, but it's stable, repeating flashes." The crew hustled to vantage points, scanning the swirling horizon for any sign of something solid beyond the roiling mass of clouds. Sure enough, there was a rhythmic pulse, pale, elongated, and strangely steady. If it was lightning, it stood out from the random bursts that typically filled the atmosphere. The Helia's Grace changed course, forging deeper into the gloom in pursuit of that promise. The engines coughed and rattled, and Mira coaxed them forward, kneading the throttle gently. When the rocky spires finally loomed out of the clouds, they were tremendous. Possibly the remnants of an ancient mountain range that had once scratched the sky. Now, they were battered by relentless hail and swirling mists. Yet, bizarrely, an eye stretched across the highest peaks, as if the geometry of the range disrupted the wind currents enough to conjure a stable indentation. It wasn't entirely clear, but the cloud layer opened into something akin to a wide dome. Through the rising plumes of swirling vapor, they glimpsed sunlight, actual sunlight. The swirling cloud vortex around those spires formed a ring of roiling black, but in the center was a pale yellow brilliance, shimmering above the rocky peaks. "By the skies," Rowan whispered. Half the crew stood in stunned silence. They had in their entire lives never seen such a grand clearing. Smaller calm zones were ephemeral, but this space, if it was truly stable, could be an Eden of unbroken air. Mira felt adrenaline surging in her veins. She realized the Helios Grace would not remain airborne for much longer without major repairs. This was their chance. Carefully she guided the ship through vicious crosswinds around the ring of mountains. The route was treacherous, forcing the Helios Grace to bank sharply, the hull's metal screaming under the strain. But the engine held, and the battered frame groaned in protest. They slid through a gap in the jagged peaks, lightning smashing against the stone in violent arcs. Then, with a final surge, the Helios Grace penetrated the swirling barrier. Wind battered them one last time, and they broke free into an open space, tranquil as a dream. Mira couldn't quite believe her eyes. The calm zone was massive, far larger than anything they'd encountered. A warm glow tinted the air. Clouds wrapped around the edges of the hidden valley, but in the center the wind was still. The battered Helios Grace drifted, her engine scalding hot from the effort. Taro let out a cheer, echoed by half the crew. Rowan exhaled so deeply he almost slumped to his knees. Even the most stoic among them displayed disbelief and relief on their faces. They found a ledge of solid rock jutting from the mountainside, evidently a stable enough anchoring point. With ropes and harpoons of their own, they moored the ship to the jagged cliff. In the still air, the cables were taut, but remained unthreatened by gale force. The Helios Grace finally came to rest. For the first time in months, the crew disembarked onto solid ground that wasn't shaking. It was precariously narrow in places, but it felt miraculous to walk on something that did not sway with the wind. Mira and Rowan surveyed the valley. Where drifts of cloud parted, short grasses and shrubs clung to cracks in the stone, tattered by the occasional gust, but surviving. Here, at these altitudes, the ecosystem was harsh, but it wasn't the complete wasteland they'd been led to expect. A trickle of water cascaded down from a higher ledge. Taro approached it, running his hand under the clear flow. It was fresh, untainted by the acidic rain that typically plagued them. He drank a handful before breaking out into a wide grin. It was hard to say what was more shocking, the stable weather or the surprising presence of life. Butterflies, or something like them, with translucent wings, fluttered between tufted plants. Some hardy, bird-like creatures rode thermals near the cliff faces. In the distance, lightning still hammered the outer ring of mountains, but it seemed to funnel skyward, leaving this heart of the range in an eerie, blessed calm. For days, the crew repaired the Helios Grace, patching holes, reinforcing the hull, with sheets of metal they salvaged from the ship's belly. They found new power cells among their leftover cargo to replace those fried by the multiple lightning strikes. Group after group scoured the ledges and crags for edible lichen and water. Spirits were high. No one had ever known such a length of peace. Mira started to dream that maybe they had found a permanent home. They could survive for months, years, even cultivating the meager plants and building a settlement on these cliff faces. Perhaps they could gather other Stormriders in alliance, forming a new community safe from the swirling fury that engulfed the rest of the planet. But Rowan was cautious. "We don't know how stable this calm truly is," he reminded Mira one evening near the flickering lantern. "It could be a fluke, something that might close in an hour or a month. Also, other ships might find their way here. If it's discovered by raiders or a war-hungry fleet, this place could become a battleground." Mira nodded. The thought sobered her. Yet she couldn't deny the transformative experience of simply resting each sunrise. Yes, they could see the sun now. She awakened to fresh air on her face, the distant rumble of the storm a reminder, but not an immediate threat. In her short life, she had never spent so many consecutive days without gripping the railing for dear life. Curiosity tugged at her too. She wanted to explore deeper into the mountains, to see if there were caves or paths that might lead below the storm line. If the storms ever receded, something the elders clung to as a half-forgotten prophecy. These peaks might be the harbinger of a changing world. But was that naive? On the 7th day in the mountain eye, dawn broke across the peak, painting the sky coral and gold. The Helia's Grace stood proudly on the ledge, newly reinforced. Crew members joked that they'd never seen the old vessel so pristine. A mild breeze stirred the valley, and for a moment, Mira almost forgot the planet was a wasteland of swirling thunderheads. Then the horizon flickered with an ominous glow. At first, it looked like the typical arcs of lightning dancing in the distance, but something unsettled her about it. The pulses were rhythmic, more like a beacon than random discharges. The frequency matched the pattern from the Raptor's claw's energy harpoons. A sinking feeling spread through her. If they'd managed to track them here, everything they'd built in these precious days could be threatened. She didn't want to raise an alarm prematurely, but ignoring it could be fatal. She and Rowan ascended a steep outcrop, vantage scopes in hand. They perched in silence, scanning the swirling ring of storm. Sure enough, a faint silhouette materialized, dark and angular against flashes of lightning. It looked different from the Raptor's claw, possibly bigger. More lights blinked behind it, not one ship but several. Brigade. Some ships bore searchlights that cut through the gloom, as if they were systematically sweeping the storm for hidden enclaves. Mira's heart thudded. "We're not alone," she whispered. She and Rowan descended quickly, assembling the crew. They all recognized the risk. If a hostile group found this calm, it could force them all out or occupy the place. On this planet, resources were scarce and famine was a constant threat. Even an alliance of ships might fight among themselves for control of a safe haven. Debate raged among the Helia's Grace crew. Some argued that they needed to barricade themselves on the ledge or conceal the ship. Others insisted on reaching out to these newcomers with a truce, hoping for trade rather than conflict. Tara reminded them how quickly hostilities can break out in the storms. The entire crew felt the tension that arises when survival depends on a precarious location. Finally, Mira decided, "We'll prepare for departure at a moment's notice. If they come in peace, we'll talk. If they come with weapons, we'll run. This place is precious, but not worth all our lives." They sprang into action. Supplies were hastily packed, the Helia's Grace ready to lift anchor. They made sure every fitting was tight, every refitted thruster was fueled, weapons were readied for defense, though Mira prayed they wouldn't need them. As the hours ticked by, the shapes in the storm drew closer, occasionally illuminated by flickers of lightning. Close to dusk, the first vessel emerged, a massive airship with red sails, battered but large enough to dwarf the Helia's Grace. Its deck teemed with figures wearing what looked like standard flight gear. Behind it, two smaller craft appeared, forming a loose formation. They crept toward the ring of mountains, buffeted by the howling outer currents. For a moment, it looked like they might pass by entirely. Then a great flash of lightning lit the cliff face, revealing the Helia's Grace against the rock. The lead ship altered course. On the Helia's Grace, tension soared. Crew members gripped railings, eyes locked on the approaching vessels. Mira stood at the helm, Rowan at her side. The lead airship glided into the calm zone, its engines roaring softly. A white flag fluttered from a pole near the bow. Whether it was a genuine sign of peace or a trick was anyone's guess. The second and third ships followed suit, streaks of lighting reflecting on their hulls. One of the new ships signaled with a spotlight, a series of short, bright beams flicking across the valley. Mira inhaled, steadying herself. She signaled back, tapping the Helia's Grace's running lights in a similar pattern. Though there was no universal language in the skies, many Stormriders recognized common signals for "stand by," "we mean no harm," or "we want to talk." Moments stretched. The large ship drifted close enough for voices to carry across the open air. A man's voice boomed across a makeshift loudspeaker. "We come seeking shelter and alliance. Our ships are damaged, and we need safe harbor in this storm. Will you receive us in peace?" Mira glanced at Rowan, heart pounding. There was no immediate sign of deception. The speaker continued, "We are from the Phoenix Fleet. We have supplies, trade goods, and we mean you no harm if you'll have us." This was precisely what Mira had anticipated. A new dynamic. If the Helia's Grace crew accepted these strangers, they might all survive together. But only if each side was honest. Still, the Stormriders had learned long ago that forging alliances could be the difference between life and death. Rowan squeezed Mira's shoulder. She lifted the loudspeaker mic in her trembling hand and spoke. Skyship Helia's Grace acknowledges Phoenix Fleet. We have found shelter here and agreed to share it if you come without violence. Keep your arms stowed and follow our guidance through the calm, so you don't set off a chain reaction in the storm. A pause. Then a voice responded. Understood. The giant ship eased closer, its engines rumbling. Behind it, the smaller vessels moved in, battered by swirling gusts, but providing protective flanks. Time seemed to slow as both sides navigated the delicate approach. Spotlights swept across the rocky ledges, searching for a suitable anchoring place. Crew members on both sides felt the electrified tension of the moment, balanced between hope and potential betrayal. But after a precarious few minutes, the Phoenix Fleet found their ledges, dropped anchor, and began to unload. Their battered faces and scarred hulls told stories of their own encounters with the unending tempest. Some looked awestruck at the near stillness of the hidden valley. Under the fading light, the two groups gathered. Mira stepped forward, flanked by Rowan and Taro. On the other side, a tall captain with a streak of silver in his hair raised his hand in greeting. His name was Corin. He introduced the handful of senior officers from his fleet. Exhaustion tempered their expressions, but the flicker of cautious optimism shone in their eyes. They spoke quietly of how they had run low on food and power cells, how one of their ships had nearly been torn apart by a funnel cloud. They had followed rumors of mountainous safe havens, never expecting to find something so wondrous. As the wind outside the ring of peaks howled on, the newcomers offered trade, mechanical parts, water purification tablets, and knowledge gleaned from ancient charts. In return, Helia's Grace's crew shared their gleanings, fresh water from the cliffs, gleaned seeds from the hardy shrubs, even the location of precarious footpaths that led to vantage points among the crags. That night they gathered in the calm, pooling resources in an impromptu council. Lanterns glowed, casting circles of light on weather-beaten faces. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a reminder that their fragile cocoon existed at the mercy of a relentless storm. But for the first time, Mira sensed not just the possibility of survival, but of community. Maybe this was how they could truly live, not just scraping by. People could come together, share knowledge, and carve out a refuge among these peaks. The question remained, would the storm eventually break, or was this pocket an anomaly? Some believed in an ultimate calm that might one day spread across the entire sky. Others considered it wishful thinking. For the moment, all that mattered was that they had found a lull in the chaos, and others had reached them without gunfire or betrayal. In the warm glow of the lanterns, with gentle breezes brushing her face, Mira recalled her father's stories about a sky once painted blue. She watched as Stormriders, old and young, from different ships, shared meager rations and tales of near-death escapes. There was laughter, cautious friendship, and eyes turned upward at the star-speckled darkness above. It struck Mira that in finding this hidden eye of tranquility, they had also found something deeper. A reminder that humans could still trust, still believe in something beyond fear. Though the storm raged on beyond the ring of mountains, the hush that settled over the calm was more powerful than any thunder. Here, for as long as the sky allowed, they could live and dream. And if the storm reclaimed this refuge someday, they would sail again, chasing the next fleeting calm. But tonight, the wind was gentle, the sky open, and the promise of solidarity glowed like starlight in the violent dark.